It's no secret that Stranger Things makes us nostalgic for the 80s, a decade which I wasn't actually alive for, but still. Therefore, it's no surprise that the latest season of Stranger Things is packed full of references to 80s movies, and movies from other decades for that matter.
Alright, slow down. What are you talking about?
So, we thought we'd go through every movie reference from the latest season and put them in one place, and yes, there will be major Stranger Things spoilers in this video.
This is getting a little hardcore for me.
Now, it's safe to say that there has been a lot going on in Season 4, with many different storylines unfolding at the same time, such as Joyce and Murray heading off to the USSR to try and save Hopper. Now, while Hopper's time in a labor camp does have some direct movie references, more on them later, his attempted rescue by Joyce and Murray was apparently influenced by one movie series in particular, Indiana Jones. In an interview with Polygon, Murray actor Brett Gelman said, "A lot of it feels very like Indiana Jones to me, the way that it's constantly balancing the tension of the adventure with humor." Which is all kind of fitting, because I could totally see David Harbour as Indy. But Indiana Jones isn't the only George Lucas movie franchise to be referenced in Stranger Things, with the series also referencing Star Wars.
I don't believe that.
Not only did the Duffer Brothers say that the darker themes of Empire Strikes Back influenced the tone of this season, but they also quote the franchise directly. As Dustin battles to vanquish Vecna in D&D, he says, "Never tell me the odds," which was a famous line said by Han Solo in Empire Strikes Back.
Never tell me the odds.
The series also quotes another major franchise, although this time it was actually a movie that came out in 1993, which is obviously after Stranger Things takes place. At one point, Steve says, "Hold on to your butts," which is likely a nod to the famous line in Jurassic Park said by Samuel L. Jackson.
Hold on to your butts.
But the movie that gets referenced the most has to be A Nightmare on Elm Street, as the show makes many nods to the classic horror movie. And the whole idea of a supernatural figure torturing teenagers through their dreams is shared between Season 4 and Elm Street. Also, the scene where Wayne Munson, which is definitely a play on the name Munster, relays the story of Victor Creel to Nancy is a nod to a similar scene in Elm Street. But the biggest reference has to be the cameo of Robert Englund as Victor Creel, with the actor famous for playing Freddy Krueger in Elm Street. Also, the whole Victor Creel scene in the asylum was straight out of Silence of the Lambs. I mean, the hallways look identical. Speaking of classic horror movies, the scene where Eleven is being bullied by a group of teenagers while roller skating feels like it came straight out of the movie Carrie, where a girl with telekinetic powers also gets picked on by a group of high school bullies. Eleven also gets something dumped on her, although luckily for her, it's just a milkshake as opposed to animal blood. One rather funny nod to a movie comes when Steve tries to reassure Robin that her crush must be into girls because she returned a VHS copy of Fast Times at Ridgemont High paused at 53 minutes and 9 seconds. This is a reference to the scene in which Phoebe Cates removes her red bikini top in a dream sequence, which of course takes place at the 53 minutes 9 seconds mark. Stranger Things has already made a number of Ghostbusters references, such as the kids dressing up as the Busters for Halloween, but that didn't stop them from making another one in Season 4. On Dustin's backpack, we can see a Ghostbusters pin that reads, "I've been slimed." Sam Raimi and the Evil Dead series have come back to the forefront of pop culture, mostly due to the fact that Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was essentially an Evil Dead movie.
This is preposterous. I demand an explanation.
The movie series also gets a call-out in Stranger Things with a poster for the original movie, which was released in 1981, seen on the wall of Jonathan's room. Speaking of walls, another Easter egg comes in the form of graffiti scrawled on the wall of a phone booth at Hawkins High. The graffiti in question reads, "E.T. Phone Home," which is, of course, a reference to E.T., which was released in 1982. Just a side note, imagine an upside-down version of E.T. The original version was nightmare fuel already. Back to the posters now. At the video store where Steve and Robin work, we can see a poster for the 1985 movie The Last Dragon, a comedy movie where a young martial artist living in New York City trains tirelessly to attain the same level of mastery as the great Bruce Lee. Speaking of posters, we can also see a poster of Top Gun and Cocktail star Tom Cruise on Nancy's wall, as the actor has seemingly been a superstar forever. Also, another little Easter egg in poster form comes in Max's room, which has a poster for the surfing documentary The Endless Summer, which is a pretty nice callback to her originally being from California. Alright, now this one's a little contentious, but like Jurassic Park, Stranger Things makes a reference to a movie that came out after the 80s time period that the show is set in. With all the crazy things going on, unsurprisingly, Eddie says,
"Nah, man, pretty goddamn far from okay."
Which is perhaps a reference to Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction and the famous line said by Marcellus Wallace after he's, well, you know, and he says, "I'm pretty effing far from okay," which, again, is kind of unsurprising. One of the best shot sequences in the season is the scene where the agents are shot and killed and Mike and Will and co. have a chaotic escape. According to Finn Wolfhard, the scene was influenced by Alejandro Iñárritu's first feature-length movie, Amores Perros. Wolfhard said there's a scene in the car in episode 5 where we're all together and it's very tense. And the Duffers really wanted me to watch this movie by Iñárritu. There's a scene that's very similar to the Agent Harmon scene in the back of the truck. It's really chaotic and there's blood, and apparently they drew a lot of inspiration from the movie. Now this next one is also a little bit contentious, but it can't just be me that sees it. When we see Vecna in the Upside Down for the first time, and in general, his body gives me a total Pinhead from Hellraiser vibe.
Who are you? Another drug-contaminated devil worshipper from Hollywood?
Now, although it might not be a movie, the Duffer Brothers did admit that the design was actually influenced by the Night King from Game of Thrones, and yeah, we can see it. Now, we said that we would talk about it again, and that's because Hopper's time as a prisoner behind the Iron Curtain was influenced by a movie with a similar theme, The Great Escape. The movie focuses on a group of Allied soldiers as they try to break out of a German POW camp, and the Duffers admitted that The Great Escape, along with Alien 3, and I mean it's not the best one, but whatever, were the main influences for Hopper's arc in Season 4. Now, when you think of Stranger Things and the movies that influenced it, Nightmare on Elm Street and Carrie aren't exactly surprising. But when the Stranger Things writing team posted several examples of inspirational works back when the scripts for the 4th season were still formulating, there was one that you wouldn't expect. You've Got Mail.
I don't think you're giving us our due credit.
Apparently, the movie influenced the romantic relationship between Joyce and Hopper. Another Stranger Things reference to a movie that was released after the show was set was the 1996 movie Scream, in particular the police investigation into a crime scene.
It's crazy.
And also there being a nod to the movie in the musical score. We even see a glimpse of the movie's star, Courtney Cox, on TV, with Max watching an episode of Cox's old show Misfits of Science, which was well before her Friends days. Back to the posters now. On Mike's wall in Hawkins, we see a poster for the Conan the Barbarian movie, which was released in 1982 and showed Arnie and his rippling muscles in their full glory. Another 80s reference is to the animated series Thundercats, which released 1 year before the season is set.
What's this? Thought we were watching Thundercats.
Another reference that takes place early on in the season comes when Dustin's girlfriend Susie hacks into the Hawkins High School computer so that she can change her Dusty Bun's grades, just like Matthew Broderick did in the 1983 movie War Games. This is also similar to another Matthew Broderick movie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where he changes his attendance record. Another reference to War Games, though, comes as Mike and Will desperately attempt to call the Nina Project to warn Eleven that she's in danger, but get a bunch of weird noises. They're able to recognize it because it sounds just like the sound from the 1983 thriller War Games. Another reference to a 1980s John Hughes movie comes with Eddie Munson's rant about the school cliques in the cafeteria, where he breaks down the school by their social groups. The jocks, the freaks, the nerds, the popular kids, and the criminals. This, in essence, is the way the character tropes boil down in Hughes's Breakfast Club, which was released in 1985, 1 year before Season 4 is set. And again in the first episode, to mark off the new season and establish the year, Jonathan states that Police Academy 3 is now in theaters. And just in case you were wondering, the release date for the film was March 21st, 1986, which is indeed the very same day that marks the beginning of Season 4. How's that for attention to detail? Now, this one isn't actually a movie reference, but he was the subject of the movie The Imitation Game, so I'm gonna add it in here.
You're a disgrace.
We're of course talking about the reference to the famous British mathematician Alan Turing, who helped to crack the Enigma code during World War II and also designed some of the very first computer processors. Will lists him as his hero, which makes sense seeing as he's a big old nerd, but fans online think that this has even further significance, with many believing that Will is actually gay. Many fans think that by having Turing as a hero, who was prosecuted for homosexual acts in 1952, it may be a clue as to Will's true sexuality.
You just made all that up.
And finally, this is actually a comics reference, but they're also movies. The Hellfire Club name is actually a nod to the X-Men's Hellfire Club, who were a key factor in Jean Grey's Dark Phoenix story. And considering how often Stranger Things has flirted with those elements in Eleven's story, it all feels pretty fitting.